and welcome to the What to Read Next podcast. In this podcast, your host, Gloria Me, will invite a bookish guest to share their favorite book recommendation. If you share a passion for books and always looking for your next read, then join us.
Welcome to the show. I'm so excited. So before we get started, I want to share a podcast that's brand new. It's from my friends Bree and Sarah, and I'm so excited for you to share this. And then we're going to go into the show with Kellisa and Katie, and we're going to talk about all of our fantasy romance. So let's hear about the podcast, and then we'll get to the show. Bye. There's a new podcast in town, and that is all about category romance. The Categorically Romance is a weekly show hosted by my friends Sarah and Bree, two best friends who love category romance. Join them each week for book discussions, author chats, and what's on the radar in category romance. Tune in wherever you listen to your podcast. Hi, Kellisa. Hi, Katie. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Hello. So happy to have you back. So, Kellisa first and then Katie, tell us what you've been up to this past year.
Okay, so what haven't we been up to? Seeing each other in person, that's for one. Yeah, I think like since we last talked, because I realized we recorded the last podcast literally like right before the world shut down. It was like, what, 2 months before?
Yep.
And I feel like my reading has changed.
Wow.
Like, so everything's changed so much since then. Like what we've been up to collectively, we started a blog. That was like our pandemic thing that we did together. I think like my reading has changed a bunch since then. I'm reading different genres than I was back in January 2020. Yeah, it's so weird to
I had to push her to that.
Yeah, that helped a lot. Forced to Change Genres by Katie.
What kind of genres are you reading now?
So before I was like contemporary only, maybe a little bit of historical. I would say like 75% contemporary and like 25% historical and maybe a little bit of everything else. But now I think it's like 25% contemporary and then 75% like historical, fantasy romance, urban fantasy, paranormal. Like give me everything that's not contemporary. Thanks, COVID.
Yep.
You want no real world stuff right now.
Yeah.
None of it.
So how about you, Katie? What have you been up to?
Well, okay. So when the world actually shut down, I found myself unemployed for the first time in forever. So that drastically changed my reading. My reading obviously skyrocketed. I wouldn't say that my genres had changed, but there was just a whole lot more of them, a whole lot more books in general. That sucks. Only I just say, Cal, how many times have I seen you this year? Like twice, 3 times in person in your front yard?
Yeah. We went from hanging out like at least two times a week, sometimes more, to literally not seeing each other for like 6 months in person, even though we only live like 15 minutes apart.
It's crazy. But in other news, I mean, even though it really did suck that, you know, the whole drastic changes happened, but one good thing to come out of 2020, I got engaged since we last spoke. So that's some good news. That's some romantic news.
That's some great news. I love this. So let's see. Let's talk about your blog. So tell us, like, what can readers expect from reading your blog?
Well, we're like, you know, we want to be good bloggers, but both of us, I think, have kind of lost a little bit of steam for posting sometimes. I know I fall into slumps a lot more often than I did before. I kind of like, I don't want to write reviews slump now, but when we do write reviews on the blog, they're longer. We're not one of those accounts that's like really comfortable doing like negative reviews on our Instagram.
We try to avoid it.
Yeah, we try to avoid it. A lot of authors follow us. We're friends with a lot of authors. Like we just don't want to post that on such like a public site where like everybody can see it. So, you know, if you want to see more reviews that are maybe not as super positive, like books that we were like a little on the fence on, or maybe they weren't full 5-star reviews, those reviews will be on our blog. Yeah, we do like some features on there, but really we're just trying to get better at actually posting.
Yeah.
I think
I'm
all of
trying to
January I
get
didn't
the groove
post
back.
anything. So, we'll
I'm
get
just
back into
like-
it.
I feel you.
I've been feeling super bad.
I feel you. Yeah, I was talking to Sarah. I'm really into this about this. Like, I was like, I'm just like, I have a backlog of posts that I need to post. And I'm like, I feel like it's a lot of work, like it
It's
is.
so much work.
But
It's so much work.
The end of the day, the content, I own the content in the blog.
Mhm.
And so like Instagram can go away. Like someone can impersonate you and you can lose your account. You know?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we started it, because we saw so many people that we knew and they were getting locked out of their accounts, or their accounts were getting hacked and they didn't get them back. And it didn't feel like a safe place to keep our reviews, like, and have them nowhere else. Because like Goodreads also has had its issues. So we just really wanted a place that we could keep all of our stuff together. So, that was our little quarantine project. I think it took us from like May to August to actually publish it and be like, hey, we have a blog. But
Is this ready yet?
Yeah, it went back and forth for a long time. Like, should we do all these changes? And then we just were like, nah, let's just post it. So, so it has a lot of reviews that we've never shared on Instagram for one reason or another. It has longer reviews. We're kind of still playing with the format to figure out how we want to do posts or what we want to do really with it, but it's there. We have one.
I love this. Yay. So let's talk about, we were talking about fantasy romance. So let's chat about, Katie, you actually introduced us to the genre. That was your go-to genre. Tell us why you loved it. And then Kellisa would tell us how she really dive into it this year.
Well, okay. I mean, obviously I can't discuss this without talking about my absolute favorite fantasy series ever, which is The Folk of the Air by Holly Black, the Cruel Prince books. And so that was probably what really, I mean, I've always loved fantasy, but I think that's what really brought me back into the genre since we got on Bookstagram. And I was very, 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 very happy that after so much needling, I finally got Kellisa to read it.
Oh, yay!
And and then I think, because I think my favorite, and again, subgenre of fantasy, it's always been like fairies and fae. So I'm always trying to find my next fix after that. So I think that's kind of like where my favorite realm of the genre is the fairy folklore. So and we also and Cal got me to read A Court of Thorn and Roses. So that was probably my second series that I got into there. Thank you, Kellisa, very much.
You're welcome.
But but I have another favorite that I just finished recently, and that is Margaret Rogerson's An Enchantment of Ravens, which is a standalone fantasy, also fae. Kel hasn't read it yet. I'm dying for her too. It's so good. I love it. It's not a series. I wish it was, because it left me wanting more, but it's actually just a short, standalone book. So if anyone's actually interested in starting, small, going into fae, fantasy, romance, that's a good place to start, I think.
Love this. Yes. Mm-hmm. And so how about you, Kellisa? You fell in love with the genre this year.
Yeah, so prior to 2020, the only fantasies that I'd read were Twilight, back when I was a wee, teenager, right when the books came out. I think we were 18 when the books came out. So I read those a billion years ago. Yeah, we were obsessed. We were very mad at the casting. It was a whole thing. Oh, except for Edward. We were on board with that. But
oh yeah. Yeah, totally. We were very into Robert.
Oh yeah. I actually gave Katie a shirt with Cedric Diggory on it. That was one of her birthday presents when we were teenagers. So we were very on board with Robert Pattinson. So I'd read that series, and then I read the first one for Discovery of Witches, and that was pretty much it. That was all the fantasy I'd read. Didn't really have too much of an interest in it. Katie was always read these about these fae and all these things, and I was like, and then COVID happened, and around the same time COVID happened, literally the week before, my husband he wasn't feeling good. He went to the ER. They found a mass on his kidney, And, when your husband has cancer at the same time that the world is falling apart, you don't want to read anything that is modern current times, because it just was like, it was so hard for me to be in a modern world when like the real world was like on fire, both like my personal world and the actual world. And so like March of 2020, I tried to read a bunch of stuff. I tried to keep my mind busy and it wasn't working. I could not finish a book. And then I picked up Rebecca Zanetti's Fated, which is like this like Fated Mates vampire series that she has. And I read it. I loved it. And then that was what got me back into reading. And from there, I was like, wait, I only either wanted to read historical, but even then I was kind of struggling because you'll read a historical and some other weird health stuff will happen, but it's like historical terms. People have fevers and they almost die. And so I was just really struggling with anything like that. Oddly enough, in Fated, there is like a virus situation, but for some reason I was okay reading about it if it was like vampires because it wasn't like real world like COVID. So from there I was like, I wanted to read more, and I grabbed I think it's like Burn for You. I don't know where it is. Burn for You by Leona Andrews. I think that's who wrote it. It's like a husband and wife team, and it was this urban fantasy. That was like where I was like, oh, I think urban fantasy is like my thing, because it's set in like a modern-ish world. They're in like Texas. There's Nordstrom. Like there's things I recognize, but at the same time, there's like magic. And I was like way into it. And that was around the time everybody was also picking up A Court of Thorn and Roses. And of course, I was like obsessed with that. Like the second book, A Court of Mist and Fury, is maybe one of like my top books ever now. I'm like so in love with it. I have not read the latest one though. For some reason I'm very like, I don't know, I just can't bring myself to like actually read it yet. I don't know if because then I have to wait for the next one. I don't know, I'm weird, but I've done it.
It took us a while to just read Frost and Starlight.
Yeah, I owned the books for over a year before I actually picked it up. And then when I first picked it up, I was like, I don't know, maybe I should start with Throne of Glass. And it actually took me, I don't know, probably like a week and a half of like starting it and like thinking maybe I wasn't ready for all these fae and high fantasy before I actually like really got like sucked into it. But yeah, since then I love paranormal, I love urban fantasy, high fantasy still. I have to be in the mood for it, I realize, because like world building. But everything else, I'm like, yeah, give it to me. So even though things are not as bad and not as scary as they were last year, like my husband had his surgery, he's doing good, we've both had our vaccines, so things are kind of starting to look more normal-ish. I don't want to read contemporary. I just want to read like either historical romance or something with like fantasy, paranormal, whatever. Give me vampires, give me fae, give me like magic. That's what I want.
I love this. So let's see, which books were you mentioned a few books you raved about. Folk of Air, Cruel Prince, African King, you also mentioned Archachar, Faded, Burn for Me. Any other books you like that our listeners should pick up when they're thinking about trying out fantasy?
So I'm going to start with the one that I just finished last night because like I can't stop thinking about it. If you want to try something super steamy, vampires, like really short, I think it was like 150 pages. Last night I just read Katie Roberts' Sacrifice, which is like from the first in her Bloodline Vampires series. It does have a cliffhanger. There is like a lot of content warnings that I was like not sure if I was going to feel okay about. But yeah, I was super into it. Like who knew? So I think almost sometimes starting short, starting with a novella. I found a lot of series have novellas before they actually dive into the series, because there's a ton of urban fantasy, paranormal fantasy and or fantasy series that are like, kind of intimidating. Like what is Cressley Cole's series? It's like 18 books or something ridiculous. Like And then there's like some other paranormal books and they're like, 40 plus books. So it's a little intimidating to be like, okay, I'm going to start. What if I don't like it? There's all these things. So many of them have novellas, like prequel novellas. And I felt that's like what Sacrifice was. Granted, I don't know how many books she's actually writing in this series. I know there's 2 out right now. I think the second also has a cliffhanger. But sometimes just grabbing something short like that really helps me. So yeah, I just think, there's some paranormal series that are really good. What else am I reading? I just started Christine, I think it's Feehan. I started her series and I have to look at what it's called because I always want to call it, it's a spinoff and I always want to call it the other name. So it's her Sea Haven Sisters of the Heart series, and it's a spinoff of her, I think, Drake Sisters series is what it's called. And it's kind of one of those that's set in a modern world. Like they're in a town that looks like a town in Northern California, like an ocean town. It's like they're like on the water, but there's like kind of like these mystical elements. And then also, this is the thing I wasn't expecting with this one. The hero is like a Russian assassin.
Oh.
There's like a fun twist in it. I picked up this one and I've been texting Katie about it because the heroine has autism and she doesn't know she has autism, but it's like very obvious to like the reader. Fun. Yeah. So I'm curious when they're going to figure out, and I'm also curious if they're going to call it autism because I've read some other books where it's very obvious the heroine is like on the autism spectrum, but they don't like call it that. So I'm curious where it's going to go. I'm curious where the Russian assassin is going to go. But like it's one of those elements that like if you think high fantasy and a bunch of world building is like too much, then jumping into something where they don't know that they're like magic, and as they figure out their magic and like why do we have like this like telekinesis, telecommunication, like why do we have all these different like things that we can do but they don't know what it is yet? I think those are really good for beginners. And then if you want high fantasy, one of the few that I've read recently is From Blood and Ash, and I know everybody's like raving about that one.
Yeah.
Because I think that one is fun because it's high fantasy. Like there's a lot of world building. It's very long. It literally took me like a few months to read it because I kept putting it down. But then like the last 15%, it was like go time. Like a bunch of stuff happens. The cliffhanger, you better have the second one ready. I'm actually putting off reading the second one until it's closer to when the third one comes out because I know it's going to be the same thing. But that one's fun because I felt like it combined high fantasy, like you feel like it's going to be like fae and all these things. And then it's like, vampires. It's like paranormal and fantasy at the same time, which I thought was fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Blood and Ash was a fun ride. I think I read most of it and then I ended up listening to the last 25%, and I was like, I can't stop listening to this book.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, it's like the last, because you're like, okay, I get what's going on. And the last 25% stuff happens and you're like, no.
No. Twist and turns, you're like, what is going on? You're like,
yeah. But, I love that when it's at the end and then you're like scrambling to grab the next book. Like that's how it was with ACOTAR. Like you just, you have to grab the next book like immediately.
Yeah.
I was so grateful that you gifted me that series up until Frost and Starlight because I was just like, good, I don't have to wait for anything. I'll just
Oh yeah, we yeah.
I had to wait for I ended up reading ACOTAR in 2016. So I read ACOTAR and Akomov, and then Akomov ended the cliffhanger, and I had to wait a whole year to do. And I was like, never again. I'm just reading full series. I can't be waiting a whole year for a cliffhanger.
Yeah, that's why I keep putting off Crescent City because like I read I think like 40% of it, and it wasn't like grabbing me as much. So I went to Throne of Glass, which I liked more. Mm-hmm. But I love how Crescent City, it feels like if you take Law and Order and throw it into Faye, that's what it feels like to me. But I need to know for sure. The second one's coming out. I think it's coming out in November, but I need to know. I need to see a cover. I need to know before I finish that book.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. So how about you, Katie? What books you recommend?
Okay. Well, I mean, I've already talked about the Book of the Year series, so I'll kind of leave it at that. But, there was another trilogy that I read that I actually feel is incredibly underrated. And that's Laura Sebastian's the Ash Princess trilogy. And that one actually has some pretty heavy subject matter. So it really depends on what type of mood that you're in, because essentially what that one is about is Theodosia, she's a princess, and when she was young, her country got invaded by this this enemy country. Her queen, her mother, the queen, is dead, and she basically is a prisoner of like this enemy court, and she's basically allowed to live among them, but basically a mockery of this other kingdom. And while she's living in her own castle, she's basically a prisoner in her own castle, right? And so essentially, 10 years go by and she has to find a way to take her country back. And what I love about it is that I feel this is a YA series, and yet I feel it is absolutely not pandering. It doesn't shy away from the hard stuff. And she has to be resourceful and smart. And she just has to she basically, finds, friends that were, also, she finds, some of her people, that were kind of slaves among, this whole, culture clash place. And she basically has to try to basically fight and take her country back. And it's just such a good trilogy, and I love it so much. And yes, it technically is fantasy. There is a bit of world building, quite a bit of magic in there. But I think you kind of have to be in the mood for it. But I think it's incredibly underrated. And Laura Sebastian is coming up with another book. I believe it's called Sick of Shadows. I think it's a Lady of Shalott based book, and I'm really excited for it. I think it's on NetGalley now.
Oh my gosh, I'm picking that one up. So I've seen the cover, and I'm like, is the series complete? That's my question, Katie. Is that
Yeah, the trilogy is complete. The Ash Princess series is complete.
Perfect.
It's complete. I love it.
Perfect. Yeah, so I can pick it up because I have a thing about series not complete. I'm like, I have to wait. I can't do this. So complete series, ready to go. Yeah.
I know that when we talked last time, you said that you read. Did you finish the first Cruel Prince book, and did you read the rest after that? Because that series is technically complete. Oh my gosh!
I know. I have to. I think I'm intimidated the fact that I have to read the Cruel Prince again, and I know I'm gonna love it. And I'm just like, the series is complete, but a part of me is like, but then it'll be over. There's the other part is I don't want the series to be over.
That's the hard part about finishing. A series that you love is that it's like, oh, now it's over. What do I have after this?
Is Holly Black gonna write another book?
I love her so much.
Yeah, so I feel so let's see, what are you currently reading?
So right now,
yeah.
Okay, I actually have to go look because I always forget, and then I have nights like last night where I'm like, I don't want to read anything that I'm actually reading, and then I pick up something new. That's my favorite thing, is to pick up something new. So right now I picked up I want to say it's The Rogue King. Yeah, The Rogue King by Abigail Owen. And Shifters is my thing that I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna like it, but a bunch of my Bookstagram friends recommended this one because she does it's Dragon Shifters, which is interesting.
But you're mad that there's no mass market?
Yes, I am so mad. If anybody from Entangled hears this, I am mad about this.
Tell us what you're mad. What exactly you're mad about?
Okay, so I don't know if anybody else has noticed, but it's, this year has been interesting for books. All of a sudden, the mass markets are bigger. They don't match the size of the other thing, which, are they easier to read without cracking the spine? Yes. Do they match the rest of the series? No. And I'm mad about it. So that's one of the things I'm mad about when books don't match. Because anybody who's seen my bookcase knows it's all mass markets. I don't have anywhere to put the bigger ones. So that's kind of annoying. So then this series, I started reading the first one, super, super into it. It's so good. I bought the second one, which I want to say is called, let me double check. I think it's called The Blood King. What's it called? Goodreads is all slow because it's so windy here. Okay, so it's called The Blood King. And a bunch of my friends, you know, they 5-starred it. They said it was amazing. So then I saw the Warrior King, the third book in the series, was coming out. So I was like, great, awesome. I pre-ordered it. And then, you know, 3 days after it releases, there's like no updates on when it's going to ship. And I'm like, this is weird. So I reached out to Entangled and I was like, hey, is this available in mass market? And they said no. It's only available in ebook or paperback, which is like twice as much and not the right size. And I don't want it. So I'm just, you know, I'm salty about it. I like my books to match. I want them to be all pretty in my bookcase. I'm still going to read it. I'm just going to buy the ebook, but I'm just salty about it. I love having entire series in mass market when they're available. And, you know, if the series size changes or if it's not available in mass market, it bums me out. I know I'm not the only book lover that said this. I've seen a bunch of stuff recently, especially where people are realizing, oh my God, none of these series are going to match because now everything's big. We're just salty about it. But the book's really good. The book is really good. Like, go off on a tangent. If you follow us on Instagram, you've seen my tangents on stories very frequently. You know, she's a phoenix shifter. He's a dragon shifter. I was like, how is this going to work? If you want a fantasy romance that jumps right into action and feels like kind of like you're watching an action movie, I would definitely pick that one up. It's really interesting. It's my first shifter and I'm like totally sucked into it. Her writing is really good. I know my friend Michelle Maisie Reads is like reading her backlist, really loves her. So that's one of the ones I'm currently reading. One of the other fantasy romances I'm reading is the Christine Feehan. I think it's called Waterbound. See how bad I am? I don't remember any names of anything. Yeah, so I'm reading Waterbound, really good. I will say that one, it goes a little slower. It feels more like there was more like telling versus like action, but I'm like totally like sucked into it. And it's a pretty thick book. It's like 400 pages. And when I'm reading it, I can't seem to put it down. And then the last one that I'm currently reading that's like fantasy or paranormal is I started the Janine Frost Halfway to the Grave.
I started that one. It's cute.
Yeah, I really like it. I was Buffy, like, you know, I was a little young when Buffy came out, and also not very into things like that at the time. So I know I've seen a lot of people compare it to Buffy, but I'm like, I have no idea. I've only seen one episode of Buffy, but I'm like really into it. I like, you know, I do this thing where I like to binge buy used mass markets from used bookstores. This is what I'm doing to make up for the fact that Katie and I no longer can go to the library bookstore all the time. Yeah, we would go to the library bookstore like once or twice a week. And all the used bookstores, we just have like bookstore days like all the time. And we haven't done this in over a year. So I buy my used books online now. Do they cost more? Yes. I can't look at them in person. It's a whole thing. But, you know, so I bought the whole series in like January and I'm pretty freaking excited to go through it and to do the spinoff series. And then tonight, I haven't started it, so I'm not currently reading it, but I am very excited to start the second one in Katie Roberts' Bloodline Vampires. It's only like 136 pages. The ebook is like $4, and I loved the first one so much. I was like, I need to buy it. So at like 3 a.m., I'm like clicking it on Amazon. So that's tonight.
So how about you, Katie? What are you currently reading?
Okay, so I actually just, you know, finished a couple of contemporaries. I'm not going to talk about that just now, but I'm actually currently reading Kiss of Steel by Beck McMaster. And that one is steampunk London with vampires. And I'm just like, I'm on board. It's pretty different though, because apparently there is a difference. There's two different types of like vampires. Like there's a vampire, and then there's something called blue bloods. And I guess they both are blood drinkers, but one is more sophisticated than the other. I'm not really sure how this works yet, but so far so good. I'm liking it. And then I haven't started it yet, but I'm going to A Heart of Blood and Ashes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if you said you read one or you started that one. Okay.
No,
I have that one actually
okay.
on audiobook, so I want to give that a try.
Yeah, that's one of the ones that I started like literally in January of last year because everybody was raving about it. And then I started it and I was like, I don't know if I'm in the mood for this. I think I read like 20% in, but now I'm like, yes, I'm in the mood. Literally, like all of our Bookstagram friends are like, it's amazing and like 5-starring it. So I will buddy read that with you.
Yes, please, let's do it. Isn't that supposed to be like kind of like Dothraki or something like that? You know,
Mhm.
like Game of Thrones
Yes.
fans really love that one.
Yeah, she based it on Conan the Barbarian, like the whole 80s barbarian movies in the 80s. So surely
I love that.
based on that. That was her sort of inspiration. And then she just created this whole big world. So yeah.
Yes,
I can get into that.
I love this. And if you like steampunk, Kellisa,
I do.
Kristen Callahan has a steampunk series. So
yeah, that's another one that I'm pretty sure after I started buying like paranormal fantasy, and then you were like, hey, she has this series. I hadn't even read her books yet. Now I've read her and I like love her contemporaries. But I hadn't even read her books yet. And you and then Jessica, Naptime writer, both said like she was amazing. And I bought the whole series. So I have the whole series. That's like, seriously, I'm probably going to read the first one like this month because like I'm on this total Kristen Callahan kick. Like I am obsessed with her.
she's so good. I really love her contemporaries. And I'm like, I went to her publicist, like, can she come? They're like, she's not available. I'm like, please, she's not available. I'm like, okay, I'll wait.
Oh my God. Yeah, her contemporaries are amazing.
Yeah, they are. So, all right. So tell us where you can find you online. Tell us your Instagram, your blog, and all the fun places.
We are online at K Square Reads. It's like KSQU. Now I always misspell it in my head when I do this. I'm like, wait. I know how to spell. I swear to God. Anyway.
So yeah, KSQUAREDREADS.com.
That's our blog. So we're basically everywhere. We're K Squared Reads. So at our blog, that's ksquaredreads.com. Our Instagram is at ksquarereads. Our Twitter is at ksquarereads. And you can also find links to our Goodreads in our Instagram bio, and also our contact page on our blog, and also both of our names on Goodreads. They say like K Squared Reads, so you know you found the right person. So
in parentheses.
We're a lot of places.
I love this. So thank you, Katie, and thank you, Kellisa, for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, rate, and review the show. This is the easiest way to support the podcast. For book recommendations, author interview archives, and other fun book resources and tips, please visit WatchReNextBlog.com. The Watch Read Next podcast is part of the Frolic Network. To discover new shows to listen and love, please visit frolic.media/podcast. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.